Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation today. It's always a pleasure to talk about our community hub, and I'm always excited to hear about other emerging community hubs across the province, because I absolutely think it's the right thing for every community to do, to establish a community hub. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our journey. We've been in the hub business for about 9 years, but it started with a long history of collaboration. So I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. I'll talk to you about some of the physical aspects of the hub. I'll tell you about some of the partners. I'll talk to you a little bit about the process and some of the successes and some of the challenges along the way. And then we'll open it up for questions. I do have a little video. We're not sure if it works. We're going to try it. It's not going to work, Mitch? All right, well, maybe we can send that out to the group, because it was a little fundraising video that you may have some interest in, but what was great about it, you also get to see the hub more directly. So Lynch, just briefly, so you have some context about who we are. We've been around for 41 years. We're in our first year of operation. And we started as a very small community development project in a neighborhood that had a higher degree of social and economic needs. So we became a community health center in 1995, and we've grown in a variety of ways since. We just don't have one location, we have 6 different locations across Waterloo region, and we provide one service across Waterloo-Wellington region. So you know what a community health center is. You have 2 of them not far away from you. We have a large role as a diabetes education service provider, which we work in partnership with a variety of groups. We provide what's called a regional coordination center, where we do central intake for diabetes and things like orthopedic specialists, so people can get access to the services they need in a more timely fashion. Where we started many years ago, and what's near and dear to our heart, is community services. So we have a youth and teen center in a townhouse. That's how we started many years ago still. We have a community center in the Hespeler area of Cambridge. We're in the Preston area of Cambridge. We have a variety of things like early years programs and youth programs. And some of those are in the hub, and some of those are out in all different locations in the community. We are a leader for what's called HealthLink. You may be doing that kind of work locally, where we're trying to respond to people falling between the cracks in the healthcare system. We know that 66% of the population, 5% of the population uses 66% of the healthcare dollar, and we need to do something different there. But our biggest venture throughout our history has been the hub at 1145. That's what we call it, I'm going to tell you about that next. So we'll go to the next slide, please, Mitch. Just to say, you probably have heard this, we focus on the social determinants of health, and there's incredible alignment between what a hub does and the social determinants of health, because we know that more than 50% of what impacts your health and well-being is a social determinant of health, whether it's education, employment, isolation was referenced earlier, income, of course, availability of housing. Those are all the things that make up the social determinants of health. So in everything that we do, we address the broader social determinants of health. Next slide. You may have seen this. This is something that was developed by the provincial government. We did have a hub secretariat when we had a Liberal government. That has since gone away. Some of that work still exists with the Ministry of Infrastructure. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen with community hubs provincially. There's a new initiative emerging with the reform of healthcare system called Ontario Health Teams. I've heard from many more groups now that they think a hub could be an enabler for an Ontario Health Team, because it's all about integration and collaboration. So it's very strategic to be thinking about a hub at this time with such phenomenal and unbelievable reform going on provincially. All right, next slide. So a little bit about our hub. We bought the land in 2007. It was the only piece of land in the community that we were able to access. So it's a new build, the hub, and we bought about 3.2 acres of land. We paid for it by the time we put a shovel in the ground for the hub, and so we used that land as equity to borrow from the bank, because this was quite an innovation at the time. The hub secretariat or the province wasn't even talking about hubs back in 2010 when we put the shovel in the ground. We did get federal infrastructure funding, almost $5 million, And there is federal infrastructure funding available for hubs today, so it's really timely to be checking that out. We were fortunate, we had a long, very positive relationship with the municipality. So the City of Cambridge was looking for a home for their 50-plus center, much like you have here. And they particularly needed a home for a frail elderly program, a day program they were operating. The building they were in didn't meet accessibility requirements, so they were looking for a new home. And so they contributed $3 million. Our board at the time did a $1.4 million capital campaign, but they had bought the land previously, so they raised about $2 million in the first round for the hub. And then we went to the bank and got $3.9 million in financing. There's other groups where you can get financing for hubs, like Infrastructure Ontario. At the time we were getting started, Infrastructure Ontario was just getting started. So it wasn't timely for us to pursue that, but we certainly looked at those options. And we struck a very, very good deal with our bank, and they were very, very good to us. And in fact, they're contributors financially to the hub as well. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So this work, we've had a long history. Back in the early days of Lang's, founding members invited agencies to come to the community and provide services. And all the agencies, this was 1977, said, yeah, that's not what we do. That's not our mandate. We're not going to come to your community and provide a program or a service. Now, we didn't know how to partner back then the way we know how to partner today. And we know that partnerships and collaboration is essential to the work that we do. So we were in a commercial plaza for a number of years, and we started to have partners come and say, maybe we could rent some space here, maybe we could have a program. Even back when we were in a townhouse in the 80s, we had a couple of agencies said, you're reaching people that we're not seeing at our traditional agency, can we come and provide a program? So that evolution did occur, it just wasn't something that was common in 1977. So it had to be an experiential journey. It had to be something that evolved over a period of time. Now, that evolution would be much different than it was over the past 40 years. So as I said, we purchased the land in 2007. Much like you've got a Trillium grant. We got a Trillium grant to do some partnership development. And so we had some tenants move into our former space. And then in 2010, we got the municipal and federal funds to kick things off. And then we broke ground in October 2010. And we opened the doors in 2011, September. So less than a year, 11 months, which is unbelievable for a 58,000 square foot facility, but we loved it because we knew it was going to be done, and done in a timely fashion. And that was the requirement of the federal infrastructure grant. Now they give you 2 years to build, which is much more realistic, right? Because I think when they built buildings so quickly, some shortcuts occurred, and and groups found that out later. And then in the last couple of years, we've just added 8,200 square feet to the hub. So it's over 66,000 square feet now because the demand has been so high. We've had a waiting list of organizations that want to move in, and I'm going to tell you more about them. Next slide. So just so you know, the hub is owned and governed by our board of directors at Lang's. So they're the owners of the hub, they're the governors of the hub. We looked at various governance models. Should we have another type of board struck, another committee to give direction? Should it be a partnership board? And the insurance implications, the liability implications for that. And agencies didn't want that responsibility. They said, you own the land, you own the building, can you be the landlord and provide a leadership role here? We said, absolutely, it makes sense to us. Our largest partner and tenant is the City of Cambridge, so it's a little bit unbelievable to us that as a small community development group, we became landlords to the municipality. But it's a great option for the municipality. It's quite cost effective for the municipality to be our partners in this building, and I'll talk more about that. We took a community development approach to selecting the partners, so just because you want to rent space doesn't mean you automatically got handed a key, right? So there was a thoughtful, deliberate process around selecting partners in the hub. And then I'm going to talk to you about various things that the partners are involved in to create the culture of a hub that you want to have in place to be a true hub. Okay, Mitch, we'll go to the next slide. So we have about 7 meeting rooms, we have a community kitchen, we have a beautiful green lounge, we have a gymnasium, we have a living wall, 2 green roofs, we do have a walking track, and it's lots of natural light. It's a 2-story building. I was a little worried that all the taxpayers would say, oh my gosh, you spent way too much money on this building. But the architect said, you only get to build it once, and why not build a beautiful space that the community is going to enjoy? And we didn't have any of those calls because people thought this was the right investment in the municipality. We're not a LEED designated building, so we didn't meet all those environmental standards. There's fees attached to that, but we have many environmentally friendly features throughout the building. So that's a little bit about the physical characteristics of the hub. We'll go to the next slide. So I want to tell you a little bit about the journey around engaging agencies that eventually became tenants in the hub. So we had about 60 organizations involved in conversations about the hub model in early days. Groups that we all worked with in many, many different ways. We had the tenants that we had in the commercial space said, yeah, we want to move in. And we had other tenants said, this makes sense. Can we also look at space in the hub? So we talked about 60 different community groups in total. Agencies, social service agencies, health agencies, etc. Then we said, okay, how are we going to figure this out? How are we going to decide who gets to come into the hub and who doesn't? Well, fortunately, we've always had a community development approach where the community is active participants in making decisions, and that's the way it should be in any community. So we said to those agencies, if you're interested, fill out this expression of interest. It's just a little template that says, what kind of service would you have? How would you align with the vision and mission of the hub? What kind of space do you need? What are your hours of operation? So very, very preliminary information. And why do you think you're a good fit for the hub? Then we had 5 planning groups go through all those expressions of interest, and then they started making recommendations. So 4 planning groups divided up the expressions of interest, and then the 5th group was everybody coming together to look at all the recommendations at once. So there were 72 different community residents involved in that process. Much like the beachcombers here, that would be a group that we would have involved. There were a few professionals around the table, a couple of our staff. We had the school principal, because we're right in the middle of 3 local schools, and we had the church pastor and a police officer. Those were the professionals involved, because all the other professionals work for agencies that were thinking about being in the hub. So it wouldn't be appropriate for them to be part of the selection process. So that was a great, great process. We had a lot of fun with that. People were highly engaged. And the community asked questions like, if you're coming to the hub, what's your approach? Are you a traditional agency that sits in your office and waits for community to come to you? Or are you an agency that's going to get out, walk on the walking track, come to the community picnic, get engaged in what's going on in the building so you can truly be a hub partner? And so the community selected those that they felt were true organizations that were going to be actively involved. We had 20 tenants initially. We still have 20 plus now. And there were only 2 tenants that we rented space to for 2 years that we weren't sure. And we said, not sure, try this on for size. And so those 2 tenants left because they weren't a great fit in the hub. So, trust your instincts when you're thinking about who are the best partners for your hub model. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So these are some of the agencies that are there. Of course, the City of Cambridge with the 50 Plus Center. We have Community Support Connections, which does Meals on Wheels. We have the Alzheimer's Society, a number of senior services, and a number of mental health services, to sum it up. The Canadian Mental Health Association would probably be our next largest tenant with about 4 offices. Lutherwood has children's mental health services, family and children's services. We have chiropractors, we have specialists, like we had a rheumatologist for 5 years, but then he retired. We had a surgeon come to town and establish her practice there and move out to a larger location. And now we have a respirologist that rents space from us. Regional Waterloo has a dental office there for what's called the Healthy Smiles program for children. And we're hoping to have adult dental health services, the Arthritis Society, and many, many more. That's just a few of the highlights of the partners. So we'll go to the next slide. So in total, there were 20 partners and growing, and I'm going to talk to you about the expansion. We had 6 allied health services at the hub. We have chiropractors volunteering to come and serve our patients that don't have any coverage to see a chiropractor. So they leave a paying practice and they come to our place and they run a low back pain clinic. The hub enables those things to happen. We weren't anticipating that would happen. These are the kinds of opportunities that came our way because we had this building. And I'm going to talk to you about the impact of some of these services a little bit later on. When you break down the services, and this is probably a bit dated now, 20 services for youth, 28 services for seniors, 25 services for adults. Now, in addition to those 20 plus partners that rent an office, there are 27 other organizations that just come to book a meeting room or use a gymnasium. So, so we have well over 50 different partners involved in what we're doing at the Hub. We'll go to the next slide. So we had to develop some tools. We had to develop a communication strategy. So we have a community hub, our partner newsletter that we send out on a regular basis. We do a satisfaction survey with the partners. We've done a large evaluation. We branded the hub and called it the Hub at 1145 with the partners. We didn't do that by ourselves. We've had many, many partner lunch and learns over the years. We've had fun stuff like ice cream socials to various events, like all of the partners have gotten together that would have youth as a mandate to plan a youth mental health fair yearly since we opened the doors. And we get 500 kids out to that youth mental health fair a year. Next slide, please, Mitch. So there's lots of integration. So here's some of the pictures. So you might not be able to see them very clearly. So the Youth Mental Health Fair I referenced, we do a clothing giveaway 4 times a year. All the partners are part of that. We do a large community picnic. We have to do it in the summertime because we don't have a lot of green space. And so we park at the local schools and then we convert the parking lot and the whole building into a community picnic. 700 people come out to that easily. In the community, and all the partners are part of that planning process and participants in the picnic. And then you probably have heard of situation tables. I know you were considering one here at one point in time. We call ours a connectivity table where 25 agencies get together weekly to deal with situations of elevated risk. So that was again, the catalyst for that was the Hub. The Hub was there, most of the partners are there. It's easy for them to come around the table and there's a whole process around the connectivity table that I'm happy to speak to anybody who's interested. But those are just examples of the kind of integration and collaboration that happens in the building. These are only a few examples, there's many, many more. Next slide. I just want to mention that we actually have a second hub in the rural community of North Dumfries Township in the village of Ayr, Ontario. And we weren't responsible for building this one, thankfully, because both were being built at the same time. So it was pretty overwhelming for us that year in 2010. So we have a CHC satellite, North Dumfries Community Health Centre satellite in the village of Ayr that serves North Dumfries Township. We knew the municipality or the township was going to build a new arena. And we said, can we think about this more than an arena? Can we think about co-locating the community health center there? There's not enough services in the rural community. Can we think about bringing some of the services out to the rural township? And so the township got very, very excited about that and said, yeah, absolutely. So we were on the committee, we helped select the architect, we helped design the space, and then we're the largest anchor tenant there. And we only have 7,000 square feet. But what's very cool about it is they have a walking track as well as we do. They have a banquet hall. They have a variety of program rooms like a youth room and a seniors room. They have the Heritage Society there. The township moved their offices there after they opened as well. And they have an NHL-size ice surface. So as a primary care organization that does flu shots, we just promote flu shots at all the hockey games, and we have the best flu shot rate ever in North Dumfries as a result, because that's what the township does. They come and play hockey and ringette and figure skate. So we call that the Hub at 2958. That's part of our branding. So we have experience both with an urban hub and a rural hub. Now the partners took a long time to come to North Dumfries. It was harder to get them there. And this slide says we have 8 partners. We have 2 more that are coming. So we have 10 partners. Now, they're not in the hub full-time, with the exception of one that rents 2 offices. Most of them are part-time services out at the hub, and that's fine. There isn't the same volume of people that need the service. So we have some shared offices that, not just one partner rents, about 3 different partners will share one office. And we have that at the main hub as well. So you can create space for partners in a variety of different ways. All right, go to the next slide. Thanks, Mitch. So people ask, what does this look like then? How do you lease the space? I mean, it's a very typical lease. There's a base rent, there's common fees involved, that covers off property taxes and cleaning and maintenance. And then we have what's called business services. So people can use our internet, they can use our phone system. And now with technology, even though you're part of another agency's phone system, your answering service can still say your agency's name, and you can even keep your own number if you're moving from one agency to the hub. So technology allows you to have more opportunity to do that integration, and you still feel like you have your own identity in the hub. The reason why we call it the hub at 1145 is people said initially before we branded it, said, well, we're going to Langs for this program. And the agency said, well, you're coming to us in the Langs hub. And so now people more commonly identify it as the hub at 1145. So it took some education. For the first little while, I think people thought it was a nightclub, you know, the hub at 1145. So whatever you do around branding, you have to be thoughtful around that. So anyway. So we have a not-for-profit rate and we have a for-profit rate. We have a pharmacy on site. We have specialists on site. The pharmacy and specialists can afford to pay more, and they should pay more. And then we have rooms to rent rates to rent meeting rooms for both not-for-profit and corporate, and the gym as well. We do charge a fee for the walking track, and I know a lot of walking tracks that are available, they're for free, but we said to the community, we do need to generate a little income from the community. Help us figure this out. And they said, we don't mind to pay a fee for the walking track. It's $1 a day or $20 a month for a pass. Well, I got to tell you, it generates $10,000 in revenue, and it's easy money to generate. And you know, it goes into a reserve fund for the replacement of our HVAC unit or our roofs or things like that. And the community's happy to contribute that. And if somebody couldn't afford the walking track fee, we're not going to charge them, right? So there's subsidy available. So those 20 partners sustained a second 5-year lease with the exception of 2, and we had a waiting list of a variety of other partners that wanted to move into the space. And that's how we started talking about expansion in 2016. We never thought after about 5 years we'd be expanding the building. We didn't believe that we would do that whatsoever. So anyway, so the expansion wasn't the easiest because we didn't plan for it, but I'll tell you more about that. So next slide. So we did a hub evaluation, and you know, what we learned from the community, we had very, very active involvement from agencies, we did key informant interviews, we did focus groups, and we did a survey. And what the community told us that 72% of them accessed a new program. And 74% of them said they were much more aware of services that they didn't know existed in the community. But what was most important is almost 82% of them said they met a new friend. They got connected to their community. They felt less isolated, right? And you know, we know a few years ago that the UK appointed a Minister of Loneliness. And we thought, why is the UK appointing a Minister of Loneliness? Well, now from the evidence and the research, we know that loneliness is a health epidemic, right? It's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's the impact of loneliness on a person's health and well-being. So we need to create spaces where the community can gather and come and be part of things in their community. So the walking track recipients, for example, they come, they walk, they self-organize all kinds of things. So just a few months back, one of the ladies in the walking track had her 95th birthday. She still walks, and they organized a birthday party for her. So those kinds of things just happen naturally. It doesn't have to be planned by a staff person. That's just community coming together and doing things in a space where they feel comfortable, welcome, and that they feel is their own. So that's really important, is creating that kind of culture if you're going to open up the doors to a home. We don't have a lot of security. We don't have a security guard. We don't have to have people sign in. And some agencies are a little worried about that. I can tell you in almost 9 years of operation, we've never had really significant incidents that we couldn't manage. And we have a code system, so we know how to respond if there's a health and safety incident. But also not having that formality to a hub is very, very important. Okay, we'll move to the next slide. So what are some of the benefits of being in the hub? Well, there's efficiencies. I mean, there's efficiencies in terms of cost, like having shared reception and meeting space. It's affordable. We grew up in a townhouse, so we're not charging agencies an arm and a leg for rent. We know they can't afford it. We couldn't afford it at one time. So the rent needs to be affordable. The accessibility, we're open 4 nights a week, and so we have an evening receptionist every night. For some agencies, they had no way of running programs or groups in the evenings because they didn't have a space where they felt safe or comfortable to offer that group. Now all of them have increased their amount of groups in the evening because the space is open in the evening for them. One of the things that people really like is the anonymity of having all of these services under one roof. So think about it. We have addiction services in the hub. We have sexual assault services. We have child welfare services. People may be coming and accessing those services, but you don't know if they're coming there or they're going to see their primary care physician, if they're dropping their kid off at an after-school program, or they're using a walking track pass. So the anonymity of coming to that space and being able to access any services that is needed in a discreet way has worked very, very well. We could have easily rented to 2 partners and given them 5,000 square feet each. But what the community said is, we want a diversity of services. We want the range of services. And I would imagine here in the South Coast, you need these services in the community. And you need the diversity of services to be available for residents that live here. Lots of opportunities for collaboration. I talked about some of the events, but we do a lot of kind of matchmaking, I would say, between agencies, because we're in the know as a partner and a landlord. So, if you have one group over here saying, yeah, we want to start a girls group about making positive choices, working through difficult relationships, all about life skills. And we have another group over here, another agency that's talking about the same thing. We're able to put those 2 agencies together and say, you both have a similar objective here. Maybe you want to get together and co-facilitate this. So it's a much more efficient use of those agency resources, and they learn from each other. So you have decreased responsibility. That's not something I want to promote a whole lot, but you're not the landlord. You don't have to worry about the cleaning and maintenance. You don't have to worry about the phones. You don't have to worry about the IT system if it goes down, right? You don't have to worry about booking. You just book a room and it happens. So, as an agency, if you only need a small office of 110 square feet, which many of our agencies rent, you don't have that responsibility of maintaining the entire building. Isn't it nice? You can come in, you have a key, you can provide your service, and you can leave. And then for the community, it's really a one-stop shop. There's pretty much everything you need is in the hub, and if it isn't, we can connect you to the service somewhere else. So that's part of our responsibility. So those are the benefits. What are the challenges in the next slide? Shared meeting space. We started with about 5 meeting rooms. I think we're up to 7 or 8 with the expansion. It's first come, first serve. We try to plan a year in advance. Some agencies are really good about that. Some don't often know what their plans are 3 months from now. So we don't have a formal room booking software. We just use the shared Outlook calendar. Now it has control that only so many people can access it and book the space. But we haven't spent a lot of money on that kind of infrastructure. For some organizations, it might represent a bit of a loss of control. They have to be in the hub space, they have to partner, they have to collaborate. But the reality is now that every agency has to do that. So I don't think that's a huge concern. Our biggest challenge has been parking. So we didn't anticipate how busy this building would be and how many people would come through the door. So we added a parking lot about 2 years ago, and now we're adding another parking lot in the back of the building. We had to add that for the expansion with different agencies moving in. Different organizational cultures, so everybody has their own way of doing things, and everybody has their own culture. One of the things I've said to the agencies that we've experienced is, sometimes they might have a staff person who's not the best performer in their office, right? And they think, fresh start, let's send them to the hub. Maybe that's a place that they can thrive and be challenged, and it might be a good fit. Well, the reality is if they've had performance challenges in the main agency, they're going to have performance challenges in the hub. So I say to them, send me your best champions. Do not send us your staff with performance challenges, because that creates some havoc and chaos as well, right? So you've got to be the staff person from your agency that's outgoing, that wants to be part of the hub, that's enthusiastic. Not somebody who's going to sit there and not perform and do well. So you really do need those champions, right? So that's part of your organizational culture. If you're an organization that has a lot of rules, you may not like the hub because you can't control the number of people that are coming through the door, right? It's a busier environment for some. We serve 17,000 people now. Since we opened the doors in 2011, there's been a 78% increase in the traffic that's used the hub. So build it and they will come. People love the hub model. They love the services available to them. So, but for some, they're not always good with that kind of chaos. And it's not horribly chaotic, it's community. Like that's what it should be. So anyway, but for some they find, oh, it's a bit busy and overwhelming. And, you know, because kids are in the gym and they're noisy, right? Seniors are playing pickleball. And if you play pickleball, the seniors are almost more tough than the kids. They've been in fist fights almost in pickleball. So anyway, so you know, the pickleball players can be pretty ruthless, but they have a lot of fun. You know, it's a more informal environment, and you have to be extra mindful of privacy requirements, right? Just because you're co-located doesn't mean you don't have to meet privacy legislation requirements. So we had a privacy breach with about 4 different agencies. And it wasn't intentional. It was probably the right thing that they did because around the breach, because there was somebody who we were quite concerned about. But we had to report that to the Privacy Commission, and we had a plan, and we worked through it. So privacy and some of those legislative requirements can be a little tricky in a hub model. Doesn't mean you can't meet the obligation and still work together though. So it's not a huge barrier, but every once in a while you get tripped up with some of those things, and you should be. It's a good reminder of meeting those obligations. All right, next slide. So some of the successes, and this is really about the building, we had the right architect and the right contractor. You know, some architects don't get along with the contractor and some contractors don't get along with the architect. Having the right team made a huge difference because they had to build this place in a year. You know, engagement of community in the selection process was highly, highly important for us, and it should be for every group. Having the right partners is fundamental, having that diversity of services, starting out with a low rules environment and shaping the culture together. Being intentional about interaction and relationship building. Just because you're in a hub, everybody could be co-located. Doesn't necessarily mean you're collaborative or you work together, right? So you have to be intentional about that. Allowing space for small organizations that provide important services. This is not a cash cow for us. I mean, we do make more revenue than what I anticipated we would as a landlord that helps pay down the financing for the building. But you know, we have one little agency that provides an essential service that doesn't have a lot of money. And we were there once, and so we understand. So, you know, their rent is 2 boxes of photocopy paper a month. So now they only use the space once a week, and we're fine with that, but it means that that service is more accessible to the community, and they're more sustainable as an agency, right? So, you know, we tend to be a bit more flexible about those things. Not everybody would be or has to be, but we think that's really, really important. Being both a partner and a landlord is interesting. We tend to be, you know, a better partner. We have to be a landlord. And, you know, the agencies, occasionally we have some landlord-tenant challenges. Not very often. I think I can count them on one hand in 9 years. So, you know, somebody didn't pay their rent once and said, oh, we're a really good partner. We said, you still need to pay your rent. So it's little things like that. Make it about access to the client, not about revenue generation. You know, you can open the doors, you can charge a lot of rent, but whether you would sustain those tenants, I think is a big, big question. And plan for a beautiful, welcoming, open space with very active engagement from the community. All right, next slide. Some other challenges, you know, for us, I talked about parking. The loan, capital funding, we didn't really want that loan, and capital money was not always easy to come by, but we did very well in my opinion. When we planned for the second expansion, for the first expansion on the second floor, we didn't put the right footings in the building. We didn't create space to add a second floor. We had to dig right down to the foundation. So I would say if you're building something or you're looking at converting an existing building over, look at those things because you don't know what you might be adding down the road. Timing and alignment of capital funds, it wasn't easy, right? So we were dealing with different grants at different time frames, different objectives over a period of a couple of years. And the model doesn't neatly fit into any capital submission now. More and more so people have wrapped their heads around hubs, so it's easier now than it was back in 2010. There's no hub money. There's no, you know, wheelbarrow of money to say, okay, here's a bucket of money, go operate a hub. So all the hub work that we do is really off the side of our desk. Now, fortunately, as community health centers, we look at the social determinants of health, we look at health promotion, we think about the broader engagement of the community and the work that we do. So it's a good fit for CHCs in particular, but many other organizations as well. but there's no money to hire a hub coordinator. Now, when we pay down the financing, that money that we're paying for the financing will be regenerated into programs and services for the hub, and some of it will continue to go into reserve funds. So we'll get there, but it will take a little bit of time. As I said, there's some groups that have expectations about constant free space, and we try to help and subsidize where we can. And then there is a fair bit of time involved, so there's some time constraints because of the needs of pulling everything together. And people have lots of great ideas. You have to set some boundaries about what you can do and what you can't do in the hub, because you know, there's so many opportunities that come our way. So we really have to critically evaluate them and say, does this make the most sense for us right now, and how does this relate to our strategic plan? Okay, next slide. I think I'm getting close to wrapping up. So just financial sustainability. So how sustainable is this? Well, the city gave $3 million to the hub, and that was their capital investment. Now what happens with the city is they don't pay rent. So they have an agreement with us that they don't pay rent for a number of years. But what they do pay is they occupy about 19% of the square footage, and so they pay 19% of the operating costs, 19% of the utilities, the maintenance, you know, HVAC repairs, all of those kinds of things. So that helps make it sustainable. And then surprisingly, and this is the number before all the new partners are moving into the expanded space, we generate about $165,000 a year in revenue for the hub. Which, if you think about a mortgage and paying down that mortgage and the equity involved in that, I mean, that's a pretty nice lump sum of revenue to actually, you know, invest in the financing. And we put some of it away in a reserve fund, which is really, really important. Next slide. So this is kind of what's next for the hub, which is now. So our new capital campaign was $3 million. I gotta tell you, it was easier to raise the money the second time around than the first time around because we didn't have the visibility that the hub now has. And so we've raised $2.8 million of our $3 million campaign this time around. And we have many more donors involved that love what we do. It's not a difficult sell for any donors or any foundations or any level of government that's interested. We are adding parking this summer that I mentioned. And you know, we asked for agencies for their expression of interest. 17 new partners want to move in. We've selected 4 that have moved in to date. We've got another 4 coming in the fall. We don't think we have room for all 17, but we're working through that process. You talked about youth services, which we think is really, really important. So we're dedicating about 3,500 square feet to a child and youth wellness hub. So there's a couple youth serving organizations on site already. They're going to move into this particular space in the hub that's dedicated to youth. 20 youth met with a decorator last week to design the space. It's going to have a tech center with computers and a 3D printer. We're going to do STEAM programs. We're going to have comfy furniture in the front. It's not meant to be a youth drop-in space, but it's meant to be a transitional space. So kids come in. They may go to the tech center 2 or 3 times. They may hang out in the little youth lounge area for a few days and get a feel of the place. But then, if they need a mental health service, it's there for them, right? So it's kind of getting them in the door to that transitional space and then getting them connected to more formal services. They can use the tech center, they can use the gym for basketball, but they can also see somebody if they're themselves or a friend is experiencing some mental health challenges or has suicidal ideation, for example. And we see a lot of that need in the community now. 77% of the referrals for children's mental health services in the Waterloo region for us are from Cambridge. 77%. This is why we need a child and youth wellness center. And then we're managing ongoing requests for space. It was great to have the group down, from Advancing Crystal Breach and your municipality. We have had 65 different cities come and visit the hub over the past 3 or 4 years because they all want to replicate the model. So we have 4 or 5 different sessions a year about coming and seeing the hub and giving a tour. So I'll be in touch with friends here in the room to pass those invitations on, because if you didn't make the first trip, you're more than welcome to come and see us another time. Because seeing it is actually really, really helpful as well. So, and it's not a bad drive to Cambridge, so keep that in mind. And then just, I think by way of wrap up, I got a few more slides and I'll open it up for questions. So that's the capital campaign I've already talked about. The president of Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada is our campaign chair, which has been unbelievable. The city has contributed. There was more infrastructure funding available. And you can see a little bit of the expansion space. Next slide is now time for questions. So when you ask a question, tell me who you are, so I have a little sense if you're from an agency, if you're a volunteer, if you're members of the community, if you're an elected official. That would be great. Questions? I answered everything you needed me to answer. Yes?
My name's Ashley, and I work as a health promoter at the Community Health Center here, which is in Fort Erie.
Awesome.
So I had two questions that maybe you provided some great information that might give us a better context. You talked about both hub sites.
Yes.
Could you describe the Cambridge site and kind of population and demographics of Cambridge versus the North Dumfries site?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So Cambridge is an urban area with a population of about 130,000 people.
Okay.
And the hub is available for anybody in the Cambridge community, but some of our programs are more targeted, like our early years programs are more neighborhood based and our youth programs, right? So not as large of a population, more of a neighborhood population, densely populated neighborhood. North Dumfries Township and North Dumfries is unusual, probably in some ways like here. Ayr seems to be the center of many communities around North Dumfries and even a little bit in Oxford County. And so we have a population of about 12,000. Great question. So that gives you a bit more context for these two hubs.
And then just to follow.
Yeah, go ahead.
What would public transit look like at?
There's no public transit in North Dumfries, right? So, which is why it's so much more essential that those partners go out to the rural community, right? So this year we're having our annual meeting out in the rural community, because even some of those leaders, like the CEO of the hospital, has never been out to the community, and he wouldn't mind if I tell you that. So now he has to come out for our annual meeting and be part of it. And if we're going to work in an Ontario Health Team model, our geography for our Ontario Health Team is Cambridge and North Dumfries. And so, and I'm sure as you're aware, small communities often are not always thought about in those applications, and that's why it's really, really important that we're out and visible in the rural community.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Beth.
So Bill, I just wanted to mention to the group too, the arts and cultural piece
Yes.
that you've added into that. When we walk through the hallways, there's paintings by children, by seniors, different hangings. They have the neatest hanging system throughout that they could trade out pictures and paintings and things like that. So that arts piece and that cultural piece I thought was really neat, because I know we've got our museum here that has really has touched base with Mitch and Rick about making sure that we have some displays, because we do have such great heritage pieces here.
That's great, and thank you for that, Beth, because, and this is how a hub evolves. We did a lot in a short period of time. To build a building in a year, was no easy accomplishment. We didn't plan for the arts community, we didn't have time, but the arts community came to us and said, can we be part of it? And they paid for what Bev was talking about, a professional art hanging system. So they have art shows, a high school art show, and a variety of art shows throughout the year, which is very, very cool. And now in the youth hub space, we're putting in an arts room as well, so a dedicated art space. And it can be used by youth, but it could be used by all ages as well, the way we've got it situated in that new space. Yes, sir.
Oh yeah, my name's John. I'm with the Niagara Ostomy Association. One of the many issues we find those when we're looking for meeting space for monthly meetings is we can find great space, but they don't have any storage lockers for us.
Good question.
It's because we bring in quite a bit of reference material on that to our meetings, so that means that somebody's got to bring it in, take it out. And what would really suit us is if we had a small locker that we could leave stuff there that we could access when we were at the meeting.
Yeah, and that was an issue for tenants on an ongoing basis, because the Alzheimer's Society, for example, in Cambridge, closed their entire office and said, we're going to rent 2 offices. And then we're going to use meeting space as we need it, right? Which made a lot of sense for them, because they were paying for meeting space for 7 days a week, and they might have been using it 3 days a week, so it was much more cost effective. But then they had all this stuff from storage that they wanted, right? And they had to purge, which is good for any organization, right? And then some of the seasonal stuff, like, if they had stuff for Christmas, for the Santa Claus parade float, we have off-site storage that they could rent a few blocks away. So that worked perfectly for agencies that needed larger storage. But then we give every agency a cupboard, Right, so we have a bank of cupboards and they're all individually locked, and every agency, even those, some of them that come more often to use a group space, can have a cupboard. Right? It's not that difficult to figure that problem out. And we have lots of other storage space as well, but it was good for those agencies to purge and just bring what's absolutely necessary. And more agencies are getting away from paper as well, so we do have the needed technology in every meeting room, free Wi-Fi and all those kinds of things as well that make it easier for groups to operate in the space. Yes, sir.
Hi, Tom and Cinna.
Hi, Tom.
You talked about a board running the operations and everything else. On that board, do you have, I believe it's Langs, but do you have representation from select different partners? Is there any kind of a group that presents to the board, or do they have actual input into the board itself?
So we have landlord-tenant meetings or partnership meetings at least quarterly where they come together and talk about any kind of landlord-tenant issues. That stuff is not generally governance issues for the board, right? The board's dealing with the strategic plan, more the policies, etc. Now we have different agencies come that come as a delegation to the board and talk about what they do in the building. And the board says, how can we help? You're doing great stuff. So we have that kind of a process in place. We have a couple of organizations. We've recruited board members that work for other agencies. Some have been in the hub and some have not been in the hub. So it's a bit of a mix. Their intention of being on the board is not about being a tenant at the hub. It's about looking at the broader vision and mission of the organization. In fact, depending on the issue that comes to the board, if an agency was renting space and also on the board, they'd have to declare a conflict of interest, right? So that would be keeping in with any board policies. So, but the agency said, we don't want to be another board. We have our own board. So, nobody's volunteering to be on more than one board at any time, right? But what's great about the space is the boards meet there. So we do give every agency one meeting room free a month to have their board meeting. And the boards have tours of the space. If they're new boards, there's a whole orientation. The other great thing we did together, we had 5 agencies do a joint volunteer appreciation event. Because everybody's planning volunteer appreciation, and when you want to do something fun, but you have each of you have a little budget, you can do a lot more fun things. Doing a special event together as 5 agencies than you can as one agency. But there hasn't been a lot of interest in tenants or agencies being the governors of the organization.
Just to be clear, your governing board is also an agency?
It's Langs, yeah. So they govern Langs as an organization, and part of what Langs does is operate the hub. So they are responsible from a liability point of view, an insurance point of view, a scheduling point of view, the leases with the tenants. They do govern over those things. But a lot of those things, once they're initially put in place, are really operational and they exist at a leadership level to manage. Right?
Now, it has the opportunity for Langs in having the hub and having more space available allowed it to identify gaps in community service and start offering additional services or not?
Oh, absolutely. So, and one of the reasons why different agencies want to be part of the hub is they can address some of the gaps that they haven't been able to address before, right? So the Alzheimer's Society wanted to build walking into their program, right? So they could build walking into their program because there's a walking track. So the region of Waterloo provides ODSP, Ontario Works, Childcare Subsidy, and a lot of income and employment programs. They now have an office on site. They're decentralizing, getting out of the region and into community, which is great. And they're seeing lots of people on their caseloads coming to the hub anyway, so doesn't it make sense for them to be there? And one of the things that they're doing now, because we have a chiropractor on site that's renting space, and we had good results with the chiropractor low back pain clinic, they said to that chiropractor, can we pay for you to see our Ontario Works clients that are going into retraining? Because some of them have low back pain or MSK issues, and they need an assessment. So rather than put somebody through training to be a personal support worker and they can't do the lifting that's required, wouldn't it be better if they had that assessment by the chiropractor and so many visits, then we can direct them into the right program that's suitable for them. And so this is a great return to work strategy for those people on Ontario Works, and the region loves it. And we just had a deputy minister down to see what was happening there. Again, that got created because the hub existed. So that was a huge gap in service. How do you get these individuals back to work that are suffering from chronic pain, right? And had the region not been there and the chiropractor not been in the hub, I don't think you would have seen that kind of initiative occur.
Bill has